Hey everybody, Nikki in Nashville here. Listen, I am back with another interview. This is only my third formal interview that I've ever done with a country music artist or similar genre or subgenre. And I gotta tell you, this one was thought-provoking. I enjoyed this conversation with this individual, this amazing human, so much. It's so interesting to hear someone else's perspective, someone who thinks obviously slightly different than you do, but has such a beautiful, thoughtful, and explorative outlook and look on the world. First of all, I have to apologize. I've held on to this interview for about 2 months now for faults only my own. One being, I absolutely hate editing. That's number one. Number two, a few weeks after I took this interview, I did in fact get it about 75% of the way edited. But unfortunately, sometimes like I do, I forget to bring my computer charger. Thusly, it died right in the middle of one of my last edits. And unfortunately for myself, sometimes I just forget to save the work as I go. So now that I've learned my lesson, once I turned that computer back on, the work that I had done over the past couple of hours was no longer, and I just kind of got frustrated with it. And that's no actual good reason to have held on to this for so long, but I did, and here we are now. And I want to say that whoever you are, wherever you are, this is a special conversation, and it's a special conversation for many different reasons, and I feel like you'll feel the same as soon as you hear it. It's about 36 minutes of a discussion with this individual who I'll introduce here in a second. But the biggest thing that I took away from this was just how incredibly well-spoken, well-read, intelligent, humble, and just quite refreshing this human was. You might have seen him out around doing some humorous or even saddening performances because he's on the road all the time. His name is everywhere from Saving Country Music to Western AF, which is the first time that I ever saw him. People think maybe he's a little weird or odd, but you know what? That part of his brand and who he is as a human is something that he leans into more than anything else, I believe, and he embraces that. And that's who he wants to be and is going to continue to be no matter what anyone says. Unfortunately, I've not gotten to see a full-length live performance from this artist, but I really hope to change that in the future. I've heard that they're incredible, again, thought-provoking, reflective, and eclectic in terms of his performance. We talked a little bit about this in the interview, that he's putting on a whole new show. He's rewritten jokes, he's rewritten props, he's got a stage all set up, and it feels almost like you're going to a theatrical show, maybe even a circus. And I think from how I've described him thus far, you probably know that the person that I'm talking about is Willi Carlisle. Willi Carlisle is what I like to call a genius folk poet. He, in fact, did formally study literature when he was in higher education, and you can definitely tell that it shows through his inspiration and his wordsmithing in his music. The lyrical poetry that he uses is not shy of inspiring, reflective, and it really allows everyone to just embrace the human experience because he covers it so well. And I have to say too that it takes a very certain person to listen to, like, and relate to the lyrics and the music that he puts out. And it takes a certain person, probably that same person, to listen to, understand, and embrace even the discussion that we're about to have. He's so in-depth and he's so advanced and he's so just intellectual with the words in his answers. And everything is a study to him. Everything takes a lot of thought. There's a deeper meaning to everything that we discuss. He really digs deep to provide the answers, and I believe that all of that is reflective also in the art that he shares with everybody. I felt at some time through this interview on my own that perhaps even my brain and my intellectual capacity wasn't at the same level of this human. But the most refreshing thing that I took away from that is that he seems like a person that just absolutely doesn't care. He wants whoever wants to listen and appreciate the art and the music that he puts out to be able to do so without fear of being different, without fear of rejection, without fear of exclusivity, without fear of not being accepted, without fear of rejection, without fear of not understanding. Anyone and everyone can come and listen and revel in the art that he creates. And he said at some point that even though he loves being out in a crowd and performing for people so he can connect with them on that level, and he'll always perform what he wants to perform, and he'll always talk about what he wants to talk about and what he stands for, that he would rather just play farmer's market music. AKA, it's like people are going to a farmer's market instead of a Walmart or a big corporate store to listen to and consume his music. It's one of those more grassroots, down-home approaches to an artist and a career that, even though he's assumed a lot of accolades over the past few years, I feel like he's always going to want to have that more simple simple, down home, connected feeling to those who come to listen to his music. One of the reasons that we actually had this interview was because he was in Nashville in March for his Grand Ole Opry debut. And while that already came and went, I'll have some footage of his performance for you at the very end of the interview, so you can kind of get a feel for who he is as a person and how he performs. But before we even get into it, which I promise I will, because I know I've been rambling and you guys are looking forward to hear me talk to Willi, one thing that he is very honest and outspoken about is the fact that he's complicated over the feeling of being asked to go perform at the Grand Ole Opry. It's not necessarily like he didn't want to be there and maybe somehow felt like he wasn't deserving, but also because the Opry has had a history of making certain decisions and certain moves that he might not necessarily agree with. A lot of people don't. But that did not stop him from going up there, and whilst probably they ask you to not take any political stance when you're on that stage, he's the artist indeed that got asked to perform on that stage for whatever reason. He deserves to be there. So the choice in performance and the choice in songs that he decides Hensley is his own. That being said, if you were there that night, you would see an incredibly moving performance. The first song of his own, it was Critterland from his most recent album, the title track, Critterland. The second song that he sang was the one that I found so moving. He decided to do no instrument, fully a cappella, war ballad from the Vietnam-ish area, where a woman is singing about the fact that her man was taken away to war and she's assumed all the duties of a single household owner. And at the end of the song, you'll know that he passes away and never is to return. Now, singing an anti-war protest song at the Grand Ole Opry, where they specifically probably ask you to be non-political, is probably one of the biggest stances that anyone these days in this genre and music in general can do. A lot of people just show up and they do commercial hits and they do what they think they're expected to do in front of a large crowd of people, and he is the only person that I've ever seen make such a decision because he felt like it. Now, it was a very, very moving performance. Not that it was met 100% with revere. A lot of people probably didn't agree with or didn't like what it is that he was doing there, but he got a partial standing ovation, including myself, and a lot of the people around me. I didn't feel like there was a dry eye. So it doesn't matter what people's reception of you is, as long as you're up there, you're singing or you're speaking your truth, in my opinion. And Willi Carlisle is the absolute epitome and reflection of that ideology. And so with that, I'm sorry that it took me so long to put out this interview. I hope your life has changed as much after listening to it as it was mine. So without further ado, let's have a conversation with Willi Carlisle. Okay, so I'm here with Willi Carlisle, who's in town for multiple things this week, including his Opry debut. Congratulations, tomorrow night.
Thanks.
Is one of the names that I have been hearing everywhere and seeing from every place, from Ameripolitan to Saving Country Music. I kind of wanted to start off maybe with just the question of, what do you feel about your Opry debut? How does that make you feel? Are you excited to be in the circle?
Yeah, well, at first I thought they had the wrong Willi, and I kind of couldn't believe it. But second of all, you know, that's an institution that's shaped the way America's music has been perceived for a long time. And I don't always think that perception, the way that it's been shaped, has been good. Mm-hmm. The way that I kind of like to look at big things like this is that what's big to me is like groups of people singing music together, mm-hmm. making music together. It's the sawdust moving across the dance floor that is like the good feeling to me. And while I have some like notes for the Opry in general, I have notes for like you know, some of American history in general. Yeah. So I think overall it's an honor to be like on stage with people like Riders in the Sky and Ricky Skaggs tomorrow, who are huge heroes of mine, like absolutely formative in my choice to try to make music for a living. So I feel complicated but good, and also like ready to get back on tour, ready to play clubs, ready to sing with people, stuff like that. It's fun to do the dress up part and even collect some notoriety maybe, or do something that feels cool, but I like the work well enough to need that, I think, more than the rest.
That's good. I think at this point you kind of have to love it or like it at this stage in a journey. So it's all about the experience for you. You like being with a ton of people and playing music for a ton of people. I think that it's complicated feeling is a really interesting way to put it, but I'm very excited for you, and I'm excited to go watch you.
Thanks for coming. Really, that's very nice of you.
Not a problem. So your background in all of this is very interesting and also important to you. Can you talk a little bit through where you come from and how that plays a part in your current style as well as your current songwriting?
Yeah. I always wanted to be a folk singer, like sort of from day one. And what I mean is, you don't know what a folk singer is when you're a kid, but I was always kind of singing songs and being silly. And my dad ran sound at like a bluegrass festival.
Okay.
And so I was just kind of around it all the time. He has good stories about smoking spliffs with John Hartford and stuff like that. And it was always this kind of like secret part of people that I loved in my life that I wasn't really that exposed to as a kid, except for like records and occasional concerts and stuff like that. So I was crazy about it, but it was not until I got to college that I really was like, oh, this is going to take over my whole life. And it was because I saw a few folk singers plying their trade and went to some square dances and playing in punk bands at the time. And
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. As soon as I saw that there was this kind of older form of music, older than punk, that still had all the energy of punk music, it was like, this is what I want. Because so many punk scenes it kind of fell apart. Somebody gets a job, somebody dies, and or a venue closes, a small town young punk scene can fall apart. So what stays was like the old folkies, was all the old kind of weird fogies. Those were the guys I liked the most.
Interesting. So was it a familial thing? Like, did you have someone in your family who was like started your introduction to music, or?
Yeah, we had the folk records in the house, but nobody played.
Gotcha.
And so that was the thing, is I thought I was a writer.
Okay.
And I still write all the time.
Yeah.
Songs or poems or stories or something. But I didn't know that you could be a folk singer. I bought a guitar at 18. So I'm kind of a late comer to it relatively. I think that, I say this with some reservation, but that might be like some of the latest you can start, right, before you're too old to begin the training.
Really?
I think maybe, I don't know.
I picked up a guitar when I was in college. I was probably 20. I'm not good at it by any means whatsoever, but I was like, I played piano for a while, maybe I can teach myself this, and tried. But then I just heard the other day that Charles Wesley Godwin didn't even know that he could play till he was like in his early 20s.
Great,
I was like, oh, interesting.
I'm so glad to be proven wrong by that. Really, I really am. That's good.
Well, I mean, you're a fabulous musician as well, and I feel like multi-instrumentalist. Like, so it was a guitar, banjo, accordion, harmonica. Did I miss any? Mandolin?
Fiddle.
Fiddle? Okay. Was that like out of want or out of necessity, kind of to pick up all those?
I wanted to pick up all of them, but I also, when there were dances, sort of square dances and contra dances and folk dances, everybody always needed a different thing, and I was always the kind of young, dumb whippersnapper rolling in. So if you wanted to learn, you kind of had to like pick up the slack. So if they needed a guitar player, it was like, well, this is what you're doing tonight. If they needed a banjo player, it was like, this is what you're doing tonight. So I kind of got a little taste of everything. The only thing that's really my own enthusiasm is the accordion, which is sort of like it's kind of a dirty secret or an obsession. Like you open the doors to my house and their accordions fall out. And
nice.
Yeah.
So is that kind of variety for you that was able to kind of get you to a lot of places? Just the versatility, I guess, being able to play all these different things to get you where you need to be.
I don't know. Yeah, I really have no idea. I think it's nice to play a lot of instruments because it's fun.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's actually kind of where I leave it. And also, I don't play them all that well. I like to play in first position. Simple chords get you a long way. You know this on guitar, right? It's supposed to be 3 chords and the truth. I have a buddy, Willi Taylor, who plays a 4-string guitar, and he says it's not 3 chords and the truth. It's 4 strings and vermouth.
Yeah.
However, you can distill it down even farther.
Great. That's hilarious. Yeah, so you were nominated last year for a Metropolitan, right? Did you win in 23? Or
I didn't. It was
okay, gotcha.
So the Metropolitan Outlaw Award that year went to Scott H. Byram.
Outlaw, gotcha.
He had been nominated 5 times, and to me, if I'm in competition with the guy, it's like, there's no way. He's so much more outlaw than I am, and I don't really feel that comfortable being an outlaw. Anyways, I think of an outlaw as like a good thing to be, but also another one of those things that's complicated. Like we don't ever look at like Jesse James and say, what if he just had a chance to be an upstanding citizen in this world? We look at criminality like it's either a badass thing or like it's an evil thing, and usually it's some combination of the two, right? So if I'm an outlaw, it's just probably because I'm loud. Probably that's probably about it. Maybe loud and angry still sort of, so.
Or at least pushing the envelope a little bit. Not really sticking to conventional what people want to put you inside of a box relatively, you know?
Right. I wouldn't want to be in a club that would have me as a member.
Oh, that's an interesting way to think about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I brought it up, I met Willi T this past Metropolitan, and he's fun.
Yeah,
He's a fun fella, isn't he? He did a writer's showcase, and I don't know if it's this way on his record, but he did a song where he was like basically speaking the whole time about how like his neighbor came over and was like yelling at his porch, and he was like, I don't know, something like that. It was so funny. Yeah, that was so great. Anyway, so it seems to you that, and I'm obviously not the first person to see the poetry in your work, in your writing. And I'm curious, like as a songwriting poet and a poet of music, who are some of your writing inspirations that you kind of bring forward into this?
That's a great question. I really like, Southern Lit kind of in general, and that was because I studied in Arkansas. It was just one of the things that we were introduced to. An Arkansas poet named Frank Stanford, C.D. Wright. I also I liked Wendell Berry a lot. It's kind of cool. I remember reading that I saw a picture of Tyler Childers and Wendell Berry, and I was like, thank God these other artists that I admire are readers too.
Yeah.
I also just really liked Walt Whitman, and my favorite book as a teenager was Moby Dick. So it was, of course, really fun to hang out with. Yeah. I didn't actually like going to school for poetry very much. I was kind of constantly dropping out. I felt pretty uncomfortable a lot of the time. I think that people from outside, sometimes looking in at university culture or something, maybe see it as pretty hoity-toity, and I think in a lot of cases they're not. It's not actually wrong. Grad school wasn't a place that I went because I knew what I was doing with my life. It was because I knew I liked to read and I didn't want to work construction anymore.
Okay.
So I was glad that it led me to be a folk singer, because it really did. I got fired from a teaching job, and it was like, well, what do we do now?
Yeah.
And I can play guitar and banjo and a few other things, so let's try.
Let's do music.
Yeah.
I love that. So you studied lit in school?
I did, yeah.
Okay, so you had a little formal background education on some of that stuff, so you're kind of in it all the time, as well as, were you writing alongside of being in school, or were you kind of like, okay, you were doing both?
I just kind of always wrote,
Gotcha.
There's some people that had to do homework, and I just kind of always was doing it, just because I liked it, and I didn't like the people, but I loved the books.
Yeah.
And I didn't fit in all that well. I didn't fit in well with the job site either, though. So, it's a little bit of everything.
Everyone is different. You don't always have to fit in. Even the word homework gives me PTSD.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I late on today?
Yeah.
So, and you talked about, just even before we got started, that you're excited to kind of get back on the road and go play some shows at bars and stuff. Is that van life something that you always want as part of your career, what you're doing in music?
Yeah, I hope so. Things change and we get older. The reason I say that is because I'm thinking about Ray Benson, Asleep at the Wheel, and he's slowing down a little bit, but his version of slowing down is just doing 100 shows in a year. So I hope eventually to slow down eventually, but I think I hope to be a born road dog. Yes, I love it enormously. I really do.
That's great. That's awesome. So I'm curious too, kind of going back to your style. So you said punk at first. That's where you kind of got your start. Yeah. So you've been described as like punk to folk, music for the people, folk singer-songwriter, bluegrass, a lot of those terms. And I'm curious how that plays into like your creative process when you get into like the writing room or even think about albums. Like, are each of your albums kind of a continuation of each other, or do they have a common theme, or like how do you approach that creatively?
It's kind of silly, but I usually come up with a cover and a title first.
Okay.
And
of the entire album.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Who knows how these things work, though? I like to try to make sure that it has a larger point, I don't ever want to just put out 10 songs because I think these are 10 good songs, or 12 songs because I think they're good. I'd like it to have a purpose behind it. I think that's it's kind of a challenge to me, to folk singers everywhere, is why don't we make work that's politically motivated at all?
Yeah.
And I don't mean that you have to be waving a flag or passing around a petition at your show. I just mean like if you want it to mean something, well then why can't you take the out here? Isn't the idea to take the out here and put it into the world, right? And so I guess if the personal is the political, you're trying to write a song so that the personal also becomes the public, right? Why wouldn't you try to organize it along the lines of something that felt meaningful to you? So in the case of my last record before this one, Peculiar Missouri, I wanted to make a pun. Peculiar Missouri is a small town in Missouri, but I also wanted to write a song about weird depression,
like the oddities of the area.
Sadness, or kind of queer suffering, if you will, too. And then with Critterland, I wanted to write a record that was about like rural places that I've loved and weird people that I've loved, and in some cases how to love the kind of ragged edges of them.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I love both of those albums, by the way, and to me they sort of seemed like, maybe I read into it too deeply, but they felt like a continuation of each other in some sort of an aspect.
I appreciate that. I like that. I'm not against it at all.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, interpretation's not always correct, but yeah, that was super interesting. And I didn't know that actually Peculiar was a real spot. I didn't know. I thought it was just like a pun
it's
intended
for the... It's a nice little town.
Oh,
it
fun.
really is,
okay.
yeah.
Interesting. I'm from southern Indiana, so small towns
places
are kind of
nobody
weird.
knows about.
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
Fly over, nobody cares. And so you were talking about how people can create stuff from the heart that is supposed to be outward. Do you feel like that's in somewhat of like, and not a bad form of the term, like in protest, like it can be not just an angry form, but perhaps a loving form, or any sort of like protest imagery?
Sure. I think that doing it with love is maybe the first principle. I think I know people in kind of folk and country music that it feels preachy as opposed to inviting people in.
Okay.
And I think I want to be sure I'm always inviting people in. It's actually why a decision to play the Opry is because I don't feel like I belong there.
Yeah.
I think it's important to go where your good can do the most good.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, I like to love people that I disagree with because it means that I'm there to do the work. Especially as like a tall white guy, it's sort of like if I can't do that, well then if I'm afraid to talk to somebody because we might argue, well then we're in bad shape, right?
Won't even be open to hearing others' point of views. I getcha.
Right. Yeah.
And I can totally not include this, but in my opinion, I think like back to the Opry, I think your presence there is going to be incredibly inspirational and motivating to some maybe other people in the space who feel like they aren't welcome or don't belong in
I hope so. That'd be cool, but it's pretty baby steps, isn't it? So yeah.
Baby steps? No, not at all. It's going to be wonderful. And a lot of your stuff too feels like a very like eye-opening exploration into, and you said I think oddities earlier, either human obscurities or oddities. What do you kind of want people to feel or take away from works that have elements like that?
The universal and the specific, right? What Jesus saw, the world in a mustard seed, right? That everybody wants more or less the same things, and so as a result, everybody should have equal access to all the joys and sufferings that life has to offer. That's the anarchist philosopher Emma Goldman, and so when she says it, it's really like charged with ideology, right? It's like that's saying like, well, this is an anarchist feminist philosopher from the 1930s, and instead of saying like, nah, it's just about everybody singing together, you know what I mean? And because I don't think it's actually politically charged to just say everybody
goes through this.
Suffers a lot.
Yeah.
And everybody has a lot of joy. And so somewhere between let's cry about it and everybody shake your booty, I guess is, yeah.
It's like a celebration of something that everybody goes through. It's a commonality amongst everyone, but not necessarily spoken about all the time as okay.
Yeah, and everybody has, something that's shocking to me is that we have like an epidemic of loneliness, but also that still a lot of people keep secrets that hurt them. Sort of trying to bridge some of that loneliness and speak aloud some of those secrets feels like some of the work.
Maybe help people feel like accepted or not alone in the fact that they're not the only one who is lonely everywhere.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Good, I definitely need that. So let's talk about then your most recent album, which, super side note, my boyfriend loves possums. So he's
cool.
like called the Possum King. It's just a thing. He used to take possums on tour with him because he's a bassist. And so we have like stuffed possums all over the house.
Oh, cool.
And I showed him this album cover and he's like, yeah. I dig this.
Nice.
Anyway, so I'm going to read this too because it's being called a stunning observation on the beauty, pain, and redemption found in all corners of humanity. And we were just kind of talking about it, but that was like your intention of the entire album that you wanted to convey through all those tracks?
Yeah, I couldn't have done it. I think that's the Rolling Stone write-up. So it's so weird to have because it's like a dream come true, but it's also like this much on a page that's this big and that, and most of the page is about the new Green Day record. So it's like not bad company. Like I think teenage me would have been really excited, but I think they nailed it. I want to write songs of reckoning and redemption, and I want to look at history with like revision and also reverence, like at the same time, and somewhere between like beauty and pain and shame and redemption is where a lot of the work takes place. And that was what I saw in common with the songs. I made you actually asked me about Post-it notes. No, you didn't ask me about Post-it notes, did you? No, somebody recently asked me if I wrote things on Post-it notes, and I don't know why, but apparently a lot of songwriters do this.
Yeah.
I've only done it with this record when I was trying to figure out what it was. I was writing themes and words that reappear, and it was all death, suicide, pain, no God. So I was just like this kind of horrifying collection of words.
Interesting.
And then I thought, okay, so instead of asking what it is, like let's ask what it's trying to get. Mm-hmm. And some of what it was trying to get at was redemption. And so that's the message that I want to convey, is kind of like nobody's outside grace.
Yeah. I think I read you explained it as it's not a Saturday night banger, it's a Sunday morning crier.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's like cry while you're cooking eggs, and when the record's done, then your last dish is washed. Yeah, that's sort of
Interesting. Well, I think do you have a favorite track off? I don't know if musicians pick favorite songs or not, but do you have one off of that?
Probably the Great Depression's my favorite.
Okay.
Just like a sad little folk song about history. It's because it hits a lot of marks for me, like personally, aesthetically, like something in the form of an old folk song.
Yeah.
Is really fun for me.
Interesting. Yeah. I love that. I fear asking people that sometimes because it's almost like asking them if you have a favorite child or something. They're like, I don't want to pick one, you know?
Right.
Yeah. I thought mine was Dry County Dust because it was like being from Southern Indiana and like almost having a semi-country upbringing. It just felt like a recreation of like the simplicity, but then also in the form of like being trapped in it, and kind of the conflicts behind wanting to stay and wanting to get out almost.
Actually, in that song, the city is Texarkana, and it's definitely chosen to be like Texarkana could be Texas, Louisiana, or Arkansas, or in some ways it could be, the three cities that surround Gary, or it could be, it could be so many different places in the American landscape,
sure.
and so many places that you don't necessarily want to be, but are also really beautiful, and maybe there are good reasons to be there. I feel the same conflict that you do, though, the push and pull of those places.
Yeah.
I really do.
And it's like there's so much energy here, but it's also exhausting sometimes. And I'm like, my dad lives in a log cabin and he sits out on the front porch and swings and like watches birds in his bird feeder. And I'm like, that sounds great right now. So yeah, very much like, I think that's why I liked it so much. But I'm curious too, because a lot of some of the concepts in these songs are, people have to dig and think a lot about how it makes them feel and what the concepts are. And I'm interested to know if you have had, or what kind of feedback have you gotten from that album? Like, are people questioning? Are they positive? Are they kind of like pushing back? Like, what do you feel has been?
I can say that everything's been good except a few things. And the worst thing that I got was somebody somebody sent me this, because I try not to look it up, if that makes sense. It's sort of like reading the comments. This is why. But
keep yourself away from that.
Right.
Yeah,
the worst thing I got was that it was folk music for Disney adults, and that it was, which essentially they were saying that it was really cheesy.
Oh.
And
I was like, what?
I think that sincerity always kind of runs the risk of being a little cheesy.
Yeah.
I want to show up in a big hat and funny shoes and say this is not cheesy. It's actually it's kind of fun, and I like it.
Yeah,
right?
That's great.
And also most of the time though, I find that people are moved by it enough that we end up having really intense conversations.
Good.
The merch table conversations and kind of the fan hug time has been really especially intense in this run, and I feel really fortunate that in my own life like I wrote a lot of these songs because of things that I'm kind of working on.
Yeah.
So it feels like I get catharsis and then like they get catharsis, because if I didn't want to have those conversations, I would be in trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're definitely opening for people, like expressing all of their personal experiences with the message that it conveys. But that's really fun, to get to know your audience, and it's nice of you to stand at the merch table and like listen to all those people, because some people could just be exhausted and kind of just want to head on out to the next one. But
Right. Yeah. I'll say it out loud as I'm working on my boundaries pretty profoundly in that regard, because it used to be, oh my Lord, like let's like tell me everything. Like,
Right.
let me buy you a beer. Let's go next door. Like I've got until 2 a.m. and now I'm trying to take it a little easy with that, or I'll lose my voice. Actually, I like the shows so much that I have to cut them off. And I like talking to people so much that I have to cut off the time I can. Otherwise, I had a bout of laryngitis last year and I had to cancel 3 shows, and it was like that broke my heart. So we're making some little changes and talking to people for a couple minutes as opposed to a couple hours now.
Yeah, so interesting. I mean, that makes a ton of sense, because at this point there are probably a ton of people who come and just like, let me share my story with you. But
I'm honored that they do, really.
Good deal. That's what everybody wants, is just like to know that they're making a difference, and everyone kind of wants to have that conversation with you. So what's next for you in your career, the next few months? Like, where are you hoping that the next couple months takes you?
We're touring really hard.
Nice.
I've got a band for a lot of the shows. I'll be back in Nashville at the Basement East really early in April, and the band is new. I play solo all the time. I really like playing solo, and I'll probably do it off and on in my career probably forever. And but the band is really exciting. It's just excellent energy. We have a whole set on stage, so we have a bunch of banners that kind of take up about 35 feet, and we have a bunch of little critter cutouts, and
I like that.
So it's almost like a theater show a little bit. We have a little puppet show that happens in the middle of it, and it's been a joy to make something that's so intense, also so fun for audiences to like figure out what joke to tell before like a real heart-wringing song has been really fun. So on tour, we're touring just absolutely friggin' everywhere. So pretty much every major market in the country we should be at this year. In the meantime, kind of building a new show from the ground up. Gonna try not to tell any jokes I told last year. And try to just start over,
Totally new material.
I hope so. Call me on it.
We'll give you that room to be creative. That's super interesting. That's going to be so fun. That's so unique. And I had a few questions that are more or less like you outside of music. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. A lot of people that ask me questions are just like, I don't want to know the artists like behind the music. Like, what do they do when they're not making music? So that's my first question.
Okay.
Like, where do we find you when you're not on the road or making music? What are you doing? Hobbies, loves, anything?
I'm living in small town Missouri, just over from the Arkansas border. These days off, I've been reading like a lot, and not good reading, but like 4 or 5 books at once. You kind of get a third of the way through one, you get bored, you pick up another,
take the next one,
go back, and I've been trying to be undisciplined.
Okay.
I play a lot, and I feel bad days when I don't play, and I don't mean feel bad like guilty, but I feel bad like inside if I don't play or sing.
Sure.
I do. Yeah, I like horse stuff. We talked about this earlier, but I'm not a competent rider by any means, but I always liked the hobby farms when I was a kid, and being close to it. I knew nothing about it in high school, but my first girlfriend was a daughter of a hog farmer, and so it's sort of been like at the periphery of my life, and I've kind of realized that a lot of that stuff brings me a huge amount of joy, so I'm kind of trying to cultivate a life with little animals one way or another.
Yeah.
Boy, that might be all I've done. That's pretty much all I've got time for.
At all. I like the undisciplined, because obviously today, like, you're here at this time and you're here at this time, and so when you go home, it's like, hey, let's kind of do what we want to do. Yeah.
It's also like I'm not that serious out here. I hope I don't appear too serious. I really do, because at home I'm not funny or interesting, or in fact I really like. There's a great science fiction writer, Ursula Le Guin, said that she wrote for 3 hours a day, and after that she tried really hard to be stupid and refused to talk about it. So one of the things I'm really liking is going to other people's shows, but not like musicians with a name, but like just anybody, anywhere that there's live music, seeing what the little scene is in, little Southwest Missouri. And I also really like to play old time music.
Okay.
I like to call square dances and play Turkey in the Straw really poorly, really fast. Stuff like that, yeah.
So experimenting with other stuff. I was going to ask you too, then what like you listen to when you're not listening to your own stuff. So it's kind of the old-timey square dance music. And
I have kind of an obsession with Ozark style fiddle music, and I collect it, and I listen to a lot of it, and I pretty much know whatever that scene of old folks is kind of most of my friends.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, I see. Yeah. So how do you feel about social media as like, are you like, yes, I need this for promotion, or no, I kind of hate it? What are your thoughts on it?
Money swallows everything, and everything that could be good about, social media has been turned into something where we all try to make a living off of it. I think it's kind of too bad that the last part of the world, our food all became grown by mega corporations and GMOs, right? Our cars are all made in these gigantic plants. Our airplanes even are manufactured as cheaply as possible, whether they're going to fall apart or not, right? Some of that stuff about modernity I see is kind of inevitable, but it's too bad that who we are and how we present to the world now has to be filtered through that experience where there's so many of us trying to kind of game the system to make it work for them.
Yeah.
Because I would like to be who I am, and I would like to have that exist entirely outside of what anybody else thinks, instead of trying to exist in an economy of attention based on clicks. So trying very hard to stay honest and stay frosty in those environments. So I hope that answers your question. I think I'd love to hear how you feel about it, if I'm honest.
Well, I don't disagree at all with that. And it's an interesting concept now that you said, like, you're kind of manufacturing it to get clicks. And when I first started talking about music, I was like, oh, I just want to talk about music because I like what I'm listening to. And I hope that other people like it too. And if they do, cool. If not, I'm sharing what, like the radio is not.
Yeah.
But now it's to a point where it's like become very pressure filled, where it's like now I have to continue to grow if I want to have it mean anything to the masses at this point, because I'm like battling with the algorithm basically to get anything seen or heard these days. So it's not necessarily even like what I'm liking anymore or wanting to give artists visibility. It's just like, how can I flip the stories so it's marketable and it's attention grabbing and people want to continue to listen, because so many things are vying for people's attention these days. It's like you have to compete with everything, and now AI and all this stuff. And I'm like, wow, I'm kind of exhausted. But other than that,
if you want to be, I keep thinking of it this way. Somebody gave this to me. If you want to be a hot dog cart, you don't necessarily have to compete with Oscar Mayer.
Right.
If you want to be a coffee shop, you don't have to compete with Starbucks. You just have to exist at a human level. At least this is what I want personally folk music to be. Is I want it to be like food on the table and food for the spirit and music for each other instead of music to feed absolutely everybody, right?
Sure.
It's kind of a nice thing about the niche is that this kind of music doesn't appeal to absolutely everybody. It's never going to be pop music. It'll always kind of fit into something that is more narrow and more gratifying. I'd like to still feel like I was selling music at the farmer's market.
Yeah.
Or that my own music was like going to the farmer's market instead of going to Walmart.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have your individuality and yourself behind it, which these days, like, ideas are a dime a dozen, and you really only have yourself. That's, the unique component of what you do, which in your aspect is incredible. So thank you for doing what you do. I love your music. So do a ton of other people. And what do you think of Nashville?
Oh, it's confusing. I love to get on stage and sing for people and say what I mean as intensely as I can and try to be maybe absurdly honest. But on stage, I'll tell you secrets, but I'll also tell you lies, and that's fun. However, so 5 years ago, I was busking on Broadway with a banjo living out of the back of my car. And then to be, even in this building that we're doing this interview, this weird, I also remember going to Honky Tonk Tuesday, like, the dance night
at the Legion.
a couple years ago, and just being like, well, this is heaven. This is about 10 times bigger than the little two-stepping scene that we have in Arkansas. Going from that to trying to go out dancing and being recognized on the street is very hard for me to square as a human being. I think it probably should be hard for me to square. It makes this place a challenge to me to make sure that we are always keeping it like on the human and individual level. And I hope that the reason I've had any success is because I'm actually talking to people and not because of anything that I've done in Tinseltown.
Yeah.
We visited the Opry, me and my buddy that are down here to go. And then we were like, well, what do we do now? And it was like, well, let's go to the Opryland Mall and let's go to the Dave & Buster's.
Ugh.
And it was like, if we're going to be here, let's be here for a second so that I can suck it in. And then we'll go see friends. We'll go live the life that we know that we're meant to live because we've been inside of the belly of the beast a little bit. And that's how I feel about it.
Interesting. Definitely congratulations for being here and your success. It's much, much deserved. Yeah, I think you make art that a lot of people resonate with, and you can kind of see that now.
Thank you, Nick. I thank you for having me, and thanks for building a platform with new media.
Yeah.
That's cool.
We're trying. And thankfully too, I think I first heard you on Western AF actually, and so I was kind of my order of operations is Western AF's YouTube, and then Jim's on VHS, and then maybe reading through Saving Country Music, and then seeing what's going on social media, and then following on Spotify, and then digging deeper. So that's kind of how I dig deep into people. But yeah, you've been doing stuff with them for quite a while now, a few years now, I feel like.
I was the second person the third person. The first was Luke Bell, rest in peace. And the second person was Coulter Wall, and then the third person was me. And so I feel actually just kind of lucky because Mike from Western AF just ran into each other in a bar.
That's so interesting.
And so it was, I'd like to say it was entirely luck, but I for sure was wandering around the country playing songs every night for years before I got lucky at all. So anytime anybody asks me for advice, it's just do you play music 7 nights a week in different towns from coast to coast? Well, then you might get lucky. Yeah. That's the only thing. That's really the only
hard
thing
work
I know.
makes luck. So you played. Did you play in Wyoming with them for one of your videos?
Oh, sure. I've visited Wyoming to play there a few times. Yeah, well, we made the van life video.
Oh, I love that one.
In Wyoming.
Nice.
And yeah. It's
nice to go so much personality to it.
Yeah, it's so much fun to do. Those guys. What I love about those guys, I hope that they know this, is that they're crazy. They're just crazy enough to do it.
Yeah.
And it requires a little bit of crazy, and that is what I adore the most, because all of the big we're on the 16th floor here.
Yeah.
All of the tall buildings can't amount to the ambitions of one crazy MFer,
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. No, I love that one so much. I think that was my favorite. I was there's so much personality in this video, and also I could just imagine going slowly with the vantage point of the camera, and then the van hitting a bump or something, and then just being wait, reverse, do that again.
We did it in 3 days, and
nice.
It was a party. Actually, is what's fun about those guys, is that it's still a party. No matter how good at it we get, it still will be a party, and that feels pretty rare. You want people to be professional, but you also want them to be fun.
Oh yeah,
right?
Most definitely. Love that. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. That's probably I got to get you out of here. So
all right.
I'm calling. Thank you.
Than't
Love it.
Cool.
Sorry, were you at Sierra Farrell last night?
No, I was not.
No? Okay.
In fact, I probably ought to have been. That would have been smart. I didn't even know what was happening.
Yeah.
What the hell was I doing? So my dad's in town. We don't spend a lot of time together.
Okay, that's nice.
The evening with my dad.
Good deal. Well, that's good. You can spend a little bit of time together, but it was really good.
I'm
I know
sure
you had
it
a show
was.
with her once before, right?
Yeah, we did a run together. We did, I think, 5 or 6 shows.
Wonderful. Oh, that's amazing. I love that. Okay. Do you feel okay about that picture?
Yes, I like Marco Price.
Of you.
I think so.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Would you welcome Willi Carlisle? It's great to be anywhere at all, but particularly amongst so many beautiful people. This is called Critterland. Well, I could have been a businessman. I was too hot-headed. Plus, I never had the money. Plus, I kinda got arrested. But my sweet old folks thought I'd make a pretty decent one of those. And I still live the kind of life where people judge on your clothes. And now it's 40 miles of back road on all-terrain tires. That little blue hymnal sitting open all the while, singing songs to a God I've met but do not know, making wagers on the critters that will see crossing the road. Yeah, the sparrow on the wing taught me to find you, and the possum knows her own mind more than I do. I'm here for all the love that I can stand. Take me to Critterland. That war's not a good idea. It's my mom's proposal. It's called The Ballad of Penny Evans. Well, my name is Penny Evans and my age is 21. I am a widow of the war that's being fought in Vietnam. And I have 2 infant daughters. Oh, I do the best I can. When they say the war is over, I tell them all it just began. I remember I was 17 when first I met young Bill. At his father's grand piano we'd play good old heart and soul. And I only knew the left-hand part, but he could play the right so well. He's the only boy I slept with, he's the only one I will. Now it's first we had a baby girl, oh we had 2 good years. After that the draft notice came, we parted without tears. Now it's 9 months from our last night, when our second babe appears. 6 months later now this letter comes, confirming all my fears.